Hey y'all, welcome to another spin-off episode. Now, last week I told you that I wouldn't reveal what we were going to be watching until now. The show that I watched and loved was Queen Charlotte, A Bridgerton Story. And if I could describe this in one word and not say anything else, I'd simply call it beautiful. But then this wouldn't be a podcast now, would it? I also want to preface this by saying this is going to be a 2-part episode. It just became so much to do it all in one part. So we're going to do the first 3 episodes and then the last 3 episodes. All right. I truly love every moment of the show, and it made my heart feel things that I hadn't felt in such a long time. Now, if you know me personally, then you know that I'm a super hopeless romantic. Like many of my favorite films and shows are romance-based. Simply seeing 2 people in love is one of the greatest things to watch, especially when it's done right. And Queen Charlotte was absolutely done right. And of course it was. It's a Shonda show after all. It took me like 2 days to finish, and that's only because I took a break to sleep for 14 hours in between. Don't ask. Queen Charlotte is 6 episodes and 347 minutes, which clocks in at about 5.75 hours. Our favorite showrunner wrote all the episodes except for episode 4, and everything she touches just turns to gold. This show quickly has become a #1 hit. Time for a character breakdown. The story follows 2 timelines in Queen Charlotte's life, and I'm going to start with the 1761 timeline where most of our story takes place. India Armatifio plays young Queen Charlotte, Corey Milcris as young King George, Michelle Farley as Augusta, Dowager Princess of Wales, aka George's mother, Arsema Thomas as young Agatha, Lady Danbury, Queen Charlotte's Lady-in-Waiting, Sam Clement as young Brimsley, the Queen's Secretary, Freddie Dennis as Reynolds, the King's Secretary. Then in the present timeline, which technically is still 1817, Queen Charlotte is played by Gulda Rochevelle, Adjoa Andoa as Agatha, Lady Danbury, Ruth Gemmell as Violet, Dowager Viscountess Bridgerton, mother of the Bridgerton children, Hugh Sachs as Brimsley, and of course, Julie Andrews as the voice of Lady Whistledown. Let's get into the episodes. The opener, titled Queen to Be,
She's your queen to be,
opens with a black screen with a disclaimer. Lady Whistledown reads, I'm going to try my best British accent here, okay? Dearest gentle readers, this is the story of Queen Charlotte from Bridgerton. It is not a history lesson. It is fiction inspired by fact. All liberties taken by the author are quite intentional. I think that was pretty good. The first scene starts in a beautiful palace in Germany. An orchestral version of Beyoncé's Deja Vu plays under the scene as Queen Charlotte spies in her brother's study as he and another man are signing documents and shaking hands. Charlotte, seeing this, and reacts by breaking what looks like a Caesar bust and storms off. She's just been contracted out to be the next Queen of England, and she's being forced to marry King George III. Then we have an actual opening credits, which are rare these days. After the credits, we are back in the present, or 1817 again. In the palace, older Queen Charlotte gets awakened to receive a message delivered by a doctor in the middle of the night. She asks if the king is dead. Thankfully, he's not. But unfortunately, her granddaughter, Charlotte of Wales, has died in childbirth. This means that at that very moment, there is now a succession problem, as none of the Queen's children have produced legitimate heirs. Like, y'all, honestly, I get why she's upset. She has 13 surviving children and, according to her, dozens of illegitimate grandchildren. And now the only successor to the throne is gone, and her kids are just acting so nonchalant about it. Like, now is the time to panic, especially because they are not spring chickens. Like, I know this is way unacceptable now to expect this of your children, but your family's future depends on this. Back in the past, Charlotte arrives to England and is swiftly taken for inspection. By whom, you ask? Well, the Dowager Princess of Wales, aka George's mother. She circles her, looking her up and down, trying to smudge her beauty marks away, and checking her birthing hips, informing her that they are good and that she'll make lots of babies. A fact that we know is very true. She sends her away to be sized for her wedding gown since hers was rejected for something more simple. Post-inspection, the Dowager Princess discusses the shade of the queen to be. She describes her as very brown. Then it's mentioned that she's of more blood, a term often used to describe people of North African or Middle Eastern descent. The princess and her advisors say that this is a problem, and people will talk. But the princess is smart and knows that if it's not a problem for the crown, it's not a problem for the people. And with that thought, the princess chooses to desegregate the community. She invites the prominent people of color to the wedding, which is in just a few hours, and titles them to form a court for Charlotte. That takes us to an interesting cut where we see a stunning young Mrs. Danbury lying on a bed as her head bangs over and over again in an oh so familiar rhythm. The camera flips and the man on top of her is an elderly Mr. Danbury. As he finishes the marital duty, he removes his teeth, places them on the bedside table, and tells his wife that he has a surprise for her later. As he briskly falls asleep, she rushes away to a bath as she angrily asks her maid, Coral, why didn't she receive any warning so she could mentally prepare herself. Coral says that there was no warning this time, that he received news and she guessed it just put him in a good mood. Coral informs Mrs. Danbury that he received an official letter from the palace. It stated that they've been invited to the royal wedding. Mrs. Danbury finds it unbelievable because the two sides never mix. Coral tells her that the Bassets, this is a name drop of the parents of Simon from season 1 by the way, they received invitations as well. As a bonus, Mrs. Danbury is also to attend to the new queen as one of her ladies in waiting. I also want to acknowledge that this entire conversation takes place in the bathtub, and not once do we see any nudity from Mrs. Danbury. And in saying that, I would just like to say that the entire miniseries, there's absolutely no female nudity whatsoever. There's some male nudity, but it's just butts, so I don't know if that counts in 2023. Back to the story. Charlotte, who is being fitted for her wedding gown, is scared of what the king may be like. She asks her newly appointed secretary Brimsley, who is 5 paces behind her at all times. And the only thing he could say, or is allowed to say about him, is that he's the king. Nothing personal, not if he's a good man or handsome or likes dogs or birds or swimming. This unnerves Charlotte, and she manages to ditch her new shadow by claiming that she needed to use the chamber pot. While Brimsley attempts to find her, the guests arrive for the wedding. The Danburys arrive, and Agatha is enamored and begins to look around. Her husband quickly tells her to behave as if they've been there before, which is something that's been passed on through the generations, but we know it is act like you've been somewhere before. As we enter the ceremony space, it is very noticeably segregated. The groom side is filled with white folks, and the bride side is filled with all shades of BIPOC people. As the less melanated side of the room whispers, the king's mother approaches the Danburys and addresses them as Lord and Lady Danbury, and that's how they will be addressed by me from now on. She thanks them for their attendance and tells them that all the members of the ton must be titled now. And yes, I'm saying ton as T-O-N. Netflix gives us this definition. The ton is the who's who of British high society during the Regency era, rich upper crust gentry, and named after the French expression bon ton, or good manners. My pal Riley over at Know It All got me hip on that first though. And at this moment, the ton will be integrated to represent the crown as a whole. Now, I'm not saying this action ended all racism, but simply by declaring togetherness is a huge step in the right direction. Charlotte, who has run away, is attempting to scale a wall to get out of marrying the king. A handsome stranger inquires her about her actions, and she expresses her concerns about the king. She then asks him if he would help her as she's a lady in distress. He tells her no, because he's the king that she's trying to run away from. She quickly apologizes to his majesty and bows, and he stops her mid-bow and asks her to call him George, as he wants to be just George with her. For their first meeting, their chemistry is electric. They're like 5 feet apart and their sparks are electrifying. He wants to tell her anything that she may want to know about him to feel comfortable enough to marry him. He tells her how he was born prematurely but overcame the doctor's expectations. He shows his scars from some injuries, how he hates fish and loves mutton, and most of all, his love for astronomy and science. She's charmed by his honesty, and they're interrupted by her brother. George tells him that she's deciding if she'll marry him or not, and he leaves and says that he hopes to see her at the altar. Charlotte, now feeling more confident in the choice made for her, makes haste to go get ready now. Charlotte makes it to the wedding, accompanied by her brother down the aisle in an incredibly stunning gown that I'm just simply not articulated enough to describe. So just be sure to check the socials for pics and videos. The groom's side of the aisle, the pews are filled with shocked and curious faces as she glides effortlessly towards the king, in contrast to the bride's side, with faces full of pride and awe. But the only face that matters right now is that of the king, and it's beaming with joy. The entire ceremony is silent as they exchange their vows, and Charlotte receives her stunning wedding ring, which will also be posted on socials, and according to India, it was very much real. Anyway, back to the royal wedding, and the only sound that enters is the applause after their first kiss. Then we have a silent reception, and they dance the night away. At the end of the wedding, they say farewell to their guests, and the new queen's brother, Adolphus, very formally tells Charlotte to take care and that he'll pray that they're soon blessed with children, and he swiftly leaves. The new Lady Danbury introduces herself and informs her that she'll be a part of her court. Charlotte says then they'll be great friends. Lady Danbury then pulls her close and warns her to be careful before her exit. She promises to come if the queen sends for her. After everyone is left, George tells Charlotte that he has a surprise for her. Beyonce's Halo starts to play during the carriage ride over to the house. George tells her that he's had it redesigned for her special. He lets her know that all of her things have already been brought over during the ceremony, and she's confused because he keeps specifically saying that it's her house. He wants them to live separately, him at his estate in Kew and her at Buckingham House. He wants her to meet the staff so that she can go to bed after a long day of traveling. As it's her wedding night, she would like for George to stay. She doesn't exactly know what they're supposed to do, but she knows that they're supposed to be together on this night. I don't think I mentioned it, but she's 17. He takes this as she's demanding him to do his marital duty, so passively he agrees to stay and hurries up the palace stairs as he feels that she's rushing him to bed. They have a huge fight because he does not want to stay, and he also does not want her to come with him to Kew. She states her understanding, but says that she's not alright with it. He tells her that it's easier this way, but doesn't elaborate on how, and refuses to talk about it further, and loudly proclaiming that he has decided and that he is her king and he owes her no explanation. After being reduced to a subject, she glumly apologizes to His Majesty and says she'll comply with his wishes. He leaves and she spends the rest of her wedding night alone. Before we get into the next episode, I just want to say that quickly, this has become one of my favorite shows of all time. Like, Bridgerton is good, but this is great. Like, I feel like it's because it's complete. Other than some things that they sprinkle into the present for the upcoming Bridgerton seasons, it is finished. And I hope after Shonda was done, she rested because she deserved it, baby. Moving along to episode 2. It starts off with Charlotte wanting to know what's on the docket for her day, but she's told nothing because even though she and her husband are apart, she's technically still on her honeymoon. The Dowager Princess has yet another meeting that she's told that Parliament is referring to the whole shebang as the Great Experiment. Then the consummation is brought into question. She speaks of how modern times are where they are granted privacy, but back in her day, 7 people witnessed her first marital act with George's father. They must find out if it happened or the Great Experiment will be in danger. Meanwhile, at Charlotte's house, she gets all dressed up for meals alone. Then she goes to bed alone, awakes alone, and repeat. She starts to grow angry as this is not the life she wanted for herself. She decides the next day she's going to see her husband. She arrives to Kew and forces George's secretary to inform her of his whereabouts. He's in the observatory. She goes to him, and while she's on her way, the king's secretary invites Brimsley in to get away from the cold. Turns out that they're a secret couple, and during their coupling, Brimsley tries to find out if there's something wrong physically with the king. Maybe that's the reason why he's avoiding the queen, you know? Charlotte walks in on George playing with his telescope, and that's a literal telescope. I didn't mean it for it to sound, yeah. Anyway, she asks him what's wrong with her that he does not want to be with her. She suspects that he's been to a brothel, even though she's not even 100% sure of what that is. But she does have brothers, so I guess that's enough for her. He doesn't understand why she's complaining. She explains to him that she's just not a regular girl. She can't just go make friends, and she must set herself apart. She doesn't know a single soul there except him, and he's left her completely alone. And he prefers the sky over her, and that hurts her. She demands that he fight for her, and he dismisses her to go back home. Brinsley and Reynolds are summoned before the king's mother regarding the consummation of the marriage. Both men lie and confirm that the deed had been done. Then we cut to the act being done again, and in that same familiar rhythm to Lady Danbury. Once again, she goes to the bath because she was once again unprepared. He was denied entry to a gentleman's club, and I guess he felt like he was owed some satisfaction after that disappointment. Brimsley goes to Reynolds and suggests that he have the king make some sort of gesture to Charlotte since he's avoiding her. He sends her a gift. It's a Pomeranian that she referred to as a deformed bunny. Charlotte discusses with Brimsley that she would like to meet her ladies in wait, but Brimsley shuts her down and suggests that she only meet with one, and that one should be Lady Danbury, as he believed that she is trustworthy. The ladies meet, and Charlotte tells her everything that went down, or I guess what didn't go down on the wedding night. Lady Danbury tells her that since she hasn't, the whole great experiment is in danger. She then draws her pictures of what it will be like so she knows when it happens. When Charlotte asks Agatha will she enjoy it, she informs her of how she never has, but she feels like it's a chore. Lady Danbury informs her that she has to do this to secure her position. In 1817, the Queen and Lady Danbury are having tea discussing the Queen's heir difficulties. She's also invited Violet Bridgerton along to join them, as she feels that she's an expert on the subject. She asks her how does she get them to want to be married? And Violet tells her, well, it helps if they're in love. The Queen says that her boys are in love, but with unsuitable women like actresses and commoners and Catholics. And of course, married women. So love ain't the issue here. Love produced over 50 illegitimate babies. Lady Danbury chimes in and says that she sees marriage as a duty, and seeing what she went through in the past, we can see why. The Queen takes their advice in her own way, of course, and will force her sons to marry and hope they will fall in love later. Back in 1761, the Dowager Princess summons Lady Danbury to meet with her. Lord Danbury is jealous because she is no one and his family had a relationship with the former king. In Lady Danbury's meeting, she's questioned about what she spoke with the Queen about. And during most of the visit, the Dowager Princess as Lady Danbury, and she gets tired of it and reminds her of her title that she gave her. While she doesn't spill any tea on Charlotte, she does tell the princess that she noticed that Charlotte has no idea that their titles are new. The princess tells Lady Danbury that she's always thought she was the quiet one, and she rebuts with, I am not quiet, it is simply that my husband is loud. She really ate with that one, y'all. The princess proposes that Lady Danbury be her fly on the wall and report back to her. Lady Danbury agrees as long as her family receives the same things that normally come with being titled, land and an estate. Then Lady Danbury flexes on her with this one after she's accused of just wanting money.
You forget that the reason your father-in-law, the king, knew my family is because my father-in-law is also a king. And Sierra Leone is very rich. We already have money. We have more money than most of the ton. What I need is for my husband to not be denied entry to whites. I need my husband to be invited on the hunts. I need to be able to cross the street to the best modistes to take the finest seats at the opera.
She simply wants her husband and the other newest members of the ton to have equality. Once again, Charlotte gets dressed for dinner. This time, when she arrives, the king is also there. He asks her to join him for a meal, and she runs away from him. He stops her and he asks her for one evening to show her where he's been. He takes her back to the observatory and shows her Venus in the telescope. He apologizes for ruining her wedding night, though she does not forgive him yet. He asks her to start over and she agrees. The two share a passionate kiss, and she asks if this means that he's coming home to Buckingham, and it does. They head home and Charlotte prepares to be deflowered by her husband. She enters the room and he calls her breathtaking. She says that she feels that she's made the wrong outfit choice because this one has a lot of buttons. And he replies, I'm good with buttons. They kiss and he asks her if she knows what happens on a wedding night. And after her lesson with Lady Danbury, sis is educated. But she says that she doesn't like the part where her head hits the wall over and over again. So she wants to avoid that if she can. They disrobe. Y'all, I hate this phrase with a passion because it gives me the ick. And I will never say it again, but I have to say it now. They made love. I'm only putting it this way because I feel like these characters, even though the word love hasn't uttered from their mouths, it was said with their bodies. The next morning, Lord and Lady Danbury arrive to their new estate where they've been granted land, cattle, and their boys a spot in school. Lord Danbury takes it all in, saying that he never thought he would see this. Not knowing what Agatha negotiated, he believes that they've been granted these things because the king now sees him for who he is. He believes that the king understands that the old days are over and that this is a new world where men are men regardless from whence they come. The old coot might be a terrible husband, but this small exchange was amazing. I obviously wasn't alive when desegregation happened back in the 60s, but I can guarantee there was someone out there who feels the way he does. At the end of the episode, Charlotte overhears a conversation between the king and his mother. He yells to her about how he's done his duties to the crown and she needs to lay off. After the exchange with his mother, the king collapses onto his chair and Reynolds rushes to retrieve his doctor. Episode 3, Even Days, opens with Brimsley and Reynolds discussing the king's whereabouts. Reynolds claims that the king is studying. Then a cellar door opens and he sees the king being tended to by a doctor. Reynolds insists to Brimsley that he's seen nothing, and Brimsley leaves to be with the queen. We then see a teenaged Violet Ledger. yes, the mother of the Bridgertons. She talks about how she's excited for Coronation Day, but her mother thinks it's all a farce. Y'all, basically, Violet's mother is a racist, and there's not another way to put it. From the moment she's on screen, she just spews prejudice rhetoric. Violet's father, on the other hand, is a very open-minded individual and has raised his daughter to be the same. Lady Danbury is on the way to tea with the princess for their check-in. She tells them that the couple is doing well and that the coronation has brought them closer. Then we cut to all the pomp and circumstance of the coronation. Yeah, like the one we just saw a few weeks ago for that old dude across the pond, that kind. After the festivities, they quit faking it, and Charlotte tells her bestie that she hates him, that he's a lying liar who lies. Somebody tell me where I know that quote from, because I looked it up and I can't find it, and I know one of y'all know it, so please help a sister out. Anyways, Lady Danbury tells her to be steadfast on becoming with child. Charlotte claims that it's awful, but then we get this quick little scene that very much proves her wrong. For two people that hate each other, they sure kiss a lot when they bang. I told y'all before in another episode, kissing leads to feelings. Don't try to claim you hate somebody when you kissing all up on them. Then we start what's essentially a montage of spicy scenes that all begin with a good kiss. But this time, it's at dinner, y'all. And they barely wait until the room is clear to get started. Dishes and pans can be heard breaking through the doors. Then at 13 minutes and 10 seconds, we get the bathtub scene. Brinsley informs the queen that the king is not attending any social gatherings at the moment and mentions that it's probably because of his doctor. After another even day moment, Charlotte asks George if he's well because she knows he saw a doctor. He denies any health issues and she leaves him knowing he's lying and quotes his words to his mother back to him. And I don't know about y'all, but I've definitely had my own private words quoted back to me, and it's truly a jarring experience. Once again, Lady Danbury is having tea with the princess and proposes that she hosts the first ball of the season. The princess shoots her down out of fear that it won't be accepted by the people. She decides that she'll throw it anyway, in spite of not having her approval. Back in 1817, Lady Danbury runs into Violet Bridgerton at the church lighting a candle for her late husband's birthday. Violet shares of happy memories with him, where she made him birthday hats every year, just like her father did for her. Lady Danbury tells her that she's fortunate and leaves swiftly. In 1761, Charlotte is being entertained by a young Mozart, as Lady Danbury is literally trying to get her ball rolling. All the queen's other court members, including Violet's racist mama, give their notice that they won't be attending. As the young prodigy plays on, the queen spots her king coming home covered in dirt. She confronts him about his whereabouts, and he tells her that he was out farming and that King George is also Farmer George. The princess has been told to ask Lady Danbury to rescind her invitations. Just as that's happening, Lady Danbury goes early to meet with the queen. She explains that the queen's marriage has put them in their positions and that they need her to unite them. The fate of her people is directly in her hands and she doesn't see them fully. After some post-even day activities, she talks to George about how she understands the pressures that he's under as a king, and she decides to throw out even days and odd days and they will just have days. She then requests that they attend Lady Danbury's ball for her. By surprise, Violet's racist mama and her charming father are the first to arrive to the ball. Lord Ledger tells her that they were definitely cabin, but the king sent a letter requesting their attendance. He congratulates her on hosting the event of the season and says that they should be friends. At this ball, unfortunately, the groups are still not mixing. That is until the king and queen arrive and start dancing. The string version of If I Ain't Got You by Alicia Keys plays as they dance. Lord Ledger literally crosses the color line and asks Lady Danbury to dance with him, and with that action, the people are one and they start mixing together. Post-party, Lord Danbury wants to celebrate, apparently the only way he knows how, this time much faster, and then abruptly stops. Y'all, the man died, and all I can think of is a comment that I saw that quoted that one scene in The Color Purple, you know, the how'd he die? And she goes, on top of me. Like, it's not supposed to be funny, but it is. Like, this time, Agatha was lucky he wasn't on top of her. She tells Coral that there won't be any more baths to get ready, and they celebrate and then stage a whole ordeal so she can seem broken up about it. In 1817, Violet is begrudgingly having tea with Lady Danbury. Her remarks offended Violet, and she wants to apologize. She tells her about how horrible Lord Danbury was, and she's lucky that she can mourn the loss of a man she loved. Edmund lives on inside of Violet, but Lord Danbury rots inside of Agatha. This is overly personal, but my dad died 3 years ago yesterday, and I was feeling really torn up about it. So if this episode is late, that's likely why. But my best friend, somehow who always knows what to say, said to me, "You're letting him live in you, like Agatha tells the Lady Violet. Now, she's not a huge Bridgerton fan, so, she hit it as best as she could. It made me smile because she knew exactly what I needed to hear and knew exactly how to get me to hear it. And I thank her for that. Enough of my sob story. Back to the episode. Charlotte awakens to muttering. She sees George manically drawing on their wall and mumbling to himself. She gets up to go check on him and he bolts out of the house, yelling and removing his clothes. He's yelling towards the sky for Venus. Reynolds tries to calm him and gather him, but Charlotte proclaims that she is Venus and they are to go inside together. And the episode ends right there. And that's where I'm going to end us as well, because next time we're going to start with episode 4. I wanted to get these first 3 out of the way and then we'll do the next 3. I think it'll work out better that way. The next episode will not come out next Thursday. I'm thinking that we might get to come out on Tuesday and then we get 2 episodes a week. So next week will be Bridgerton Part 2 and the start of our new show, Snowfall. So make sure you are subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts so you can get the notifications for both episodes. And make sure you join us. I'm really excited to see how everything turns out. Make sure you're following Rewatch on all the stuff. We actually recently just got a Facebook, so go follow and like that page and you won't miss any updates or photos, videos, anything. Go follow that. Also the Instagram at Rewatch Pod and Twitter at RewatchPod_ if you're interested. And there's always going to be lots of stuff out there for us to do. I will see you guys next week. Back to binging. Try and catch me.